My name is Chris Osawa, and I'm a senior developer at Beeswax. Been a FileMaker developer for just close to my first decade as a FileMaker developer, and been certified from 12 to 18. Been slacking a bit on the latest one, I guess. I'm also a certified developer at AWS. I've been a speaker at developer conferences for a few times now in the States, in Berlin. My background is quite mixed. I actually started off I did my first degree in maths, and then I moved over to finance. I did a master's, and I started off my career as an accountant. So I didn't really have a computer science background. I was mostly self-taught, but now currently I'm doing an online CS degree at Georgia Tech. And I'm from Cyprus. I was born, raised, and currently live there. And I work from Beeswax remotely for the past 4.5 years now. So a long time. And in my whatever free time I have, I'm also an amateur astronomer. I even co-founded a non-profit back at home for astronomy. This is one of the photos I took from one of my telescopes. Right, so what's really on the agenda today? We have 3 keywords: rapid serverless technologies. First thing, we're gonna talk a few things about serverless, kind of introduce everyone to it, the ones that don't know it. And we are gonna talk about in general, methods for doing FileMaker integrations. And by integrations, I know it's a pretty broad term, and I'm speaking specifically for web-based apps and APIs. And I'm going to prove that this is quick, because we are going to do a live coding demo for the remaining half an hour. How many of you know serverless, what it is? Few hands. So serverless is basically just code that lives on the cloud. That's all it is. And no servers were harmed in making this film. Actually, this means that there are no servers in serverless. They are actually managed. There are servers, but you don't need to manage anything. You don't need to worry about them at all, configuring, etc., etc. You only need to add your code, and that's it. The rest of the actual configuration and the servers behind the scenes, they are set up for you. It's sort of like a utility, but it needs serverless being functions up on the cloud. They need an input, and they produce some output. So you definitely need a triggering event. This triggering event could either be a manual event, or through an API, or automated like a messaging queue, etc. There are plenty of possibilities. And being up on the cloud, and just being tiny bits of code up on the cloud, means that cloud computing providers, they can scale this big. They can give you hundreds of available megabytes of or gigabytes of memory to work with. For each function, and also you can run them in parallel. So if you have a very big task, you can have a parent task that breaks that down into subtasks, and does all those, let's say, chunks of work in parallel, running the same instance. So it's really quite powerful. Quite a few websites now, they run completely serverless, like web apps out there. And one thing that that's kind of a caution to know about serverless is that it's just code that runs, and poof, it's gone. It finishes. So it's completely ephemeral. It doesn't save the work. Even if you try and restart to trigger the same instance, maybe the data is there, but you shouldn't rely on that. It's actually there. It could very as well be gone already. And being a utility means that you pay as you go, just like your electricity, as much as you need to. You don't need to have servers running 24/7 and pay for the privilege of having that. You only pay for fractions of the time. So it's literally fractions of the time. This is the pricing from AWS. In particular, we're going to use two main services here today. One is called the API Gateway, which is going to give us the bare bone ability to have a hosted API, and the serverless Lambda function. The cost is really cheap. Like, it's less than a coffee for 1 million requests via the API. And on Lambda, it's based basically on memory allocated and the duration. In the example I'm going to be doing, because I run it again, I know that my maximum memory that's used is like 58 megabytes. You'll see it's really, really small. And the build duration usually takes about like 800 milliseconds, could be a bit more, a bit less. But with their pricing, it means that you can run like 600,000 transactions before they even charge you $1 for it. So for the usage that we do as FileMaker community with our clients, it's usually pretty low. So this is a nearly free option for us to use. So let's go into the FileMaker side of things. So how do we build integrations with FileMaker? Has anyone not used this? Insert from our good friend Insert from URL. And is everybody happy using that?
No.
No happy customers. Huh? Personally, I think Claris should have actually made a completely new script step when they were building this, instead of putting it on top of the existing implementation and kind of build this a bit better. But this is really what we have to work with in FileMaker. And with this, we can do our CURL commands and access APIs directly, send data, fetch data, etc. There are, of course, third-party plugins out there that you can buy, and these are specific for particular apps, like this QuickBooks connector. That's a calendar, Google Calendar integration that you can buy off the shelf. These are engineered by other groups, and you can buy them, use them with your application if they are available and they suit the app that you want. And just before the pandemic, we had our Claris Connect being launched, and that was kind of obscured after all that all that madness, let's say, of the initial pandemic period. And but Claris Connect, it hasn't really grown so much into add more apps, unfortunately, over these past 2 years. But it's definitely an option. They have a pretty good selection, I'd say, of the really top apps that are being used, and if it's available over there, and it also integrates nicely with FileMaker already, go ahead and use this. But I'm going to come back to Claris Connect as well. There are, of course, competitors, Zapier and Make also, big competitors. They have over 1,000 apps, well over 1,000, I guess. I even, back in 2019, I did a presentation in Berlin for Integromat, how to integrate that. So what's new? What I'm going to be proposing to you. So, are you all familiar with what I already showed? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, another way of building up integrations came to my mind when I was looking at pages like this. When you're asked to do an integration, first thing you want to go to, it's the page for the API documentation. And somewhere when you're moving around in different, browsing between different pages, you land on a page like this. How do you all feel when you land on this page?
Despair.
Why? Because you don't have this, right? Exactly. You can come to this picture, you feel a bit depressed, let's say, oh my God, why isn't FileMaker so I can really get started and get moving? So I thought that, we have all these SDKs that are available by the different providers, and they don't have. It's usually 4 to 6 main programming languages that are available in SDKs. And SDKs, they provide a good way to abstract all the complex authentication. Don't need to handle so much about the authentication. Some of the authentication could be very complex, not just not just the basic stuff. And you also don't need to worry about the curl options. All the curl options are basically embedded in the within the SDK as part of objects and methods, etc. All within there. And these are very well tested and vetted by professionals, and they are released officially by the companies themselves. So you can really rely on these SDKs that they are almost bug-free, let's say. So it's a pretty good starting point, and they're free to use. So one way of building basically a middleware application, just like with Claris Connect, sort of. It's running on servers, probably on-premise or cloud, and you can use one of the main programming languages. For example, you can use Python with a framework like Django. Django is or Express. They basically set up the API. So you can make calls to this particular server that's running Django with Python or Express with Node or whatever else, and you can send your CURL and behind the scene utilize the SDK. Or you can do exactly the same approach, but do it using serverless approach. These are the 3 main cloud computing providers: AWS, Google Cloud, and Microsoft Azure. Now, a few words about authentication. Like the 2 really main forms of authentication. There are few more, but the most common ones, let's say. First one is server-side, using just a token. That's always the easiest option. You can just put up the token up on the URL or the body of the CURL, and that's really the easiest option. On the other hand, the other option is to use OAuth. But OAuth, how many of you work with OAuth? Quite a few. So OAuth needs actually to make a two-way call from the application that you're building on FileMaker. It needs to open up a browser, authenticate the user there, and then it needs to call back to your application. But because your application is not a web application, it's just the FileMaker file, that's usually a bit of a problem to have a webhook to catch back this callback that's going to be run from the app. There are ways around this. If you have PHP running, still if you use the older versions of FileMaker server, you can just have a very quick PHP script there to catch that callback and just to use the FMP URL to redirect you to FileMaker, or you can just do exactly the same bit of code as a static HTML page, and even if you don't have hosting for that, you can even host that on an S3 bucket, and it's just a very small HTML file. You can probably find to host it pretty much anywhere. So that's one way of doing it. Any questions? What I already showed, or should we?
Small question about the problem that FileMaker is not very well suited to answer to a callback when an API needs an endpoint. Have you tried with calling directly the FileMaker APIs? Because we tried, but we ended up putting something in between because.
Yes, you need to put something in between, either PHP script or HTML.
Solution, so we didn't overlook anything.
Yes.
Just
Yeah. I don't know any other solution, to be honest, but just leaving it as.
Clarus Connect, right?
Clarus Connect, yes. But Clarus Connect, it's basically just catching the callback and using data API. It's sort of a deeper integration instead of using FMP URL. Yes.
There is sometimes possibility to use WebViewer.
Sorry?
Using WebViewer.
Using WebViewer.
Because it's if you are getting the token back with the GET request, you can just show it. It doesn't matter which step pages, you just get the URL from that.
Okay, all right.
It's a trick, but it's not working all the time because sometimes those third-party APIs needs a specific domain which is calling. Like sometimes those work with any domain.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's one of the peculiarities. It really depends on the API. But yeah, that's pretty good technique. Yeah.
But that's also the problem is that you need some kind of user interaction there.
Yeah.
And typically you don't want to have any user interaction with those APIs. So.
Yeah. Right.
There's one caveat with the WebViewer, and that's any cookies that are saved in WebViewer live only until the end of the session.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So if you use
those are clear.
browser, those cookies can be saved and they can live for another week if they are set so. But in WebViewer, they only live until you close the file.
Yeah.
But it just depends on how another system is sort of designed. So you can just get the token and store it in FileMaker afterwards. You can read it from the WebViewer. And it's like you don't doesn't matter the system.
Okay, all right. It's good techniques. All right, let's get started. So this is the home screen for AWS, and first thing we'll dive right into the Lambda function. Those are just the very few services. They have like hundreds of services in there, so it's I don't know all of them. Is the screen okay? Can you all read it? Right. So first thing I have to do is actually I want to build a layer. I want to get my SDK up on the cloud. And the way that I'm going to do this is I'm going to create a layer. First of all, I'm going to open up my terminal. I'm going to go into my desktop so you can actually see the file there popping up on the right. And I'm gonna do all this in Python, but you can use the other supported languages as well. Each one of the supported languages have their own specific ways of building layers, so you need to look into the documentation. The one that I'm going to show you, it's specifically for Python, and it basically asks you to have a folder called Python, and in there you need to import the package that you wanna introduce. So the package is called SquareUp. If I go to the dev page here, we are going to be sorry, probably forgot to say what integration I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be using SquareUp, which is a payment provider, quite a popular one, and their SDK, see here, PHP, and from here may have clicked on the wrong link.
Didn't you want to use Python?
Pardon?
Didn't you want to use Python?
Yes, I'm just going to show you usually where you get them, but I don't know why I'm redirected here. The page that I actually got it from, it's PyPy. It's where you actually search for projects. If I search here, SquareUp. Oops, sorry, not this one. Oh, this one. You can actually see they have the command here to install the package. But I'm using PHP 3, so I need to specify that it's pip3, so it knows that it's Python 3, and it's going to dump everything into the folder I just created. Thankfully, this works fairly fast. All right. See now, my folder here has all different packages. It would have been nice to have something like this in FileMaker, right? Just install one command. So I'm gonna compress this, and I'm gonna head over to my layer, create my layer, and I'm gonna call it Square SDK, and I'm gonna upload this from my zip file. And I'm going to choose some compatible runtimes. I'm going to choose Python 3, 3.7, and 3.8. I know all these three work with this. And this allows you, the Lambda function is going to be a specific version of Python, but this kind of like gives you the whole spectrum that should be allowable so that you can actually use this layer. So now all the SDK code from SquareUp for Python has been uploaded up on my cloud, and I can start by creating my Lambda function. I'm going to call it Square from scratch, and it's going to be a Python 3.9. So this one has to be, as I said, one of the languages that you selected when you build the layer. I'm going to leave everything to default. Now, it takes a minute just to configure everything for us. And up here you get like this visual depiction where it shows you where is your code. This is your code called Square, and that's where the actual code is. We're going to see that in a moment. And layers, it allows you to upload up to, I think, 5 different layers. It could be different packages, or it could be packages, like groups of packages. It could be Square plus something else, and whatever you want. It doesn't really have any limitation. So it's basically just packages that need to work along with your code. And you, as I said before, we actually need a triggering point. And for destination, we are gonna leave that out because we don't really need a destination. For us, it's mostly going back into AWS to another service. So I'm going to scroll down to my layers, and I'm going to choose custom layer, see Square SDK, which version has versioning. Every time you upload a new package, it keeps a version. So you can be specific on which version. If you upload a new version up on the layer, you need to change it from here as well. Otherwise, it would break stuff. Oh no! Why did that happen? Well. Sorry about that. Didn't save it. Just be a moment. Right. So we're done with this step. So the next step is to actually build our API, our trigger, and you can choose where you want to get your things from. We are going to build an API. We're creating a new one, and I'm going to use a REST API. HTTP is quite a different service, so use REST API. And for security, I'm going to be using an API key. You can use Open if you want to, or IAM, which is building basically a user for the API and user role. That's going to be a bit more work and a bit more advanced. So the API keys is going to be pretty straightforward. And let's go into the API. Now the API gives me a tree, just like any API. You have the tree of the root and all the different paths. And you see there where it says any, it means that it can accept anything. It can accept get, post, put, all the C URL. And I'm going to go ahead and delete this method because I want to restrict it to just using post. and I'm going to specify that I want this to point to a Lambda function, and I want to make this a proxy. A proxy means that it's going to take whatever API it's going to accept, and it's going to pass it over to the Lambda function. Not just the data, but also the metadata, if you want to do something with that. So usually I check that, and I'm gonna type in my Lambda function here. So it's gonna connect the two together now. And this is, the entire route that it's taking from receiving a request and coming back, going all the way to the Lambda function, then coming back with the response. So I need to make an edit here to actually make my API key required for safety. And the next thing I need to do is I need to actually deploy this, because it's not finished. Whatever changes I make here, I need to actually deploy them. And you can build different stages, like you can build your production, you can build your dev in different stages, so that you don't have any unpleasant, you or your users don't have any unpleasant experiences. And I need to connect now my API key. My API key has been created already for me here, and I want to copy this, and I'm going to put it up on this very tiny FileMaker file that I built on site. And I go here to my where is it? So sometimes the interface could be a bit confusing. So my API key is, it's already connected to my, okay. So it's already connected to my my API, and so yeah, I don't really need to do, shouldn't really need to do anything here. But on my stage here, you can actually see the URL that we need to copy for our endpoint. So let's try this first. It says hello from Lambda. So we kind of connected the two together. Now, I'm gonna go back into my the documentation from Square, and I need to get it's expired. In Square, I need to set up a developer account and just create an application, and it gives you the token. So I'm gonna get the token here, and I'm not gonna add this into my FileMaker app, and I'm actually gonna add this to my Lambda function. So over here in my Lambda function, under configuration, we have environment variables, and I'm gonna paste this in. And for a key, it's just a key value pair. I'm gonna call it like that because I need to call it like that, and you'll see why. That's it. I mean, this one now it's connected. Has the has our SDK, has our keys to connect to Square. If I go to my documentation here under Quick Start, you can actually see using the SDK, you get. Sorry, why am I looking Python? PHP, sorry. I should be looking at Python, sorry. So in order to actually use the SDK, you need to build you need to import the library, the package, and then you need to create the object that will have all the methods and access to the entire SDK. And it just gets the token and the actual environment if it's sandbox or production. And that's why I named it like this, because this needs to match to the environment variables that I set up on my my Lambda function. So I'm just gonna copy all of this, and this is my Lambda function, the basic Lambda function that you get as soon as you launch a static function. It just imports the JSON library, which is included with the Lambda function. There's only very few packages that are included, just to be as lightweight as possible. And then it defines a function that gets the event, which is whatever we throw through the API, and returns back our status code 200 in it's a successful call, and well, this is the hello Lambda. So I'm just going to paste all of this in here. And one thing to note, if you just a tip, if you sometimes look at videos or other blog posts online about this, sometimes the name of the Lambda handler might be different. And if you copy paste that and absolutely nothing works, the problem is that that name there needs to match with this one down here. And you can edit this, I mean, you can reconfigure it. So, I'm done with this step. I have everything loaded and ready to use. And now we're going to go back into the documentation and study a little bit the documentation and see what Square has to offer. It's a payment solution, so I'm just going to check the customer page, and here you see customers. This is the Python section here to call the customer. It just calls the object, the name of the API, which is customers, and the actual action, like list of customers. And it doesn't provide any parameters. So if I go to another one, like create customers, you see, client, customers, create customer, and then something in a bracket, right? And this goes on. So we have exactly the same pattern because this was designed by professional developers, of course, and they use exactly the same design pattern. So that's really quite helpful for us. Why? Because what do you think we can use for? Does anyone know what we can use for this? We can actually use indirection. We have three things. Well, first of all, it's our main object, and we have an API name, we have an action, and we have parameters. Just three things. And these are the three things that I'm going to be passing from my FileMaker file over here. I'm just going to pass the API name, list customers, for example, and nothing in my parameters. So now I'm going to do the actual coding part, the actually interesting part in all of this. So I'm passing all those three things, and I need to get them from the body of my event. Just gonna load this up from my JSON, and that's how I called all of them. API name, the action from the body, and now I'm going to use a built-in function from Python to actually do our indirection, and it's called get attribute. From my client object, I want to get the API name, and then I need to do this one more time. Over my API now, I could just do a one-liner here, but this works. It's better to follow. And then I'm just passing, right next to my function, I'm just passing my my arguments as keyword arguments. Python has this. You can either pass the arguments as all of them, you know, like one by one, like, or you can pass them as keyword arguments and pick and choose which arguments you want to pass. Oops. Oh, sorry. I need to do one small thing here because I need to check if I'm gonna be sending in empty. If I'm gonna be sending something empty, then I need to handle that. Right, and now I've connected everything together, and I want to get back my my result. And yeah, sure, I can do error checking and everything. So just going to be making this really simple for now. And from my result, I get back the body of my result. And just in case anything happens, let's deploy this. Cool. And the FileMaker script is like that simple. Just, you know, put the data, which is just these three parameters: API name, action, and anything else has parameters. And you've seen coding this, and we've actually, you know that I'm not doing anything funny behind the scenes. But let's try another one. Like, I mean, if you want to create a customer, so I'm going to show you the parameters part. It's create customer. We're still on the same API, and I'm just going to copy this part here. You see here, this is a keyword parameter. It specifies that it's body, and that's the contents of the parameter. And I need to build a JSON here for with body, and then just paste everything in, and it created my customer. Right.
Wow. Can it be simpler? Can it be simplified?
It can, but I'm not sure if it would require GPT-3 or similar technology behind.
Yeah.
So
It's just a lot of
Yeah.
moving parts.
Yeah, with GPT you could just send a text, hey, create a customer with this name and blah blah blah, and get it done.
it's actually pretty simple. I mean, if you want to do this for many
Yeah.
customers, you can have one layer that's going to be shared among all the customers. You only need to do that once and update it every now and then. You need to have, I mean, can have one API gateway to run for all customers and connect that to different instances of the Lambda functions if you want to customize, or just use one Lambda function to handle all the requests. I put this together sort of like a guidance in sort of picking up which integration method you want to use. If there's a plugin out there, use it. If there is upon Claris Connect, use it. Or otherwise, you need to apply the triad. The triad is, do you know an object-oriented programming language or someone in your team? If you don't, you're in trouble. But Python is really, really simple. If there is an SDK in the first place, some APIs are, totally simple. They don't even have a SDKs at all. So that's going to be a problem. And you should be actually needing to use quite a few endpoints from the API. I mean, if it's just for one or two calls, I mean, come on, you can just do it natively up on FileMaker. And the other option over here, if Claris Connect is already easily available or already available, then Claris Connect has an app for calling Lambda functions. So you can even simplify this even more by not doing the API gateway part, and you can call the Lambda function direct. If you want to do this like an on-prem server for whatever reason, go ahead. You can do that. If it's, you have a server available, or you want to do it up on cloud, spin up a small Linux server. One example that I've actually used this was a custom, the latter option. The customer had a small Linux server they could spin, but they also had they used an app that's like really old, that uses SOAP client and PHP scripts, and like very, very complicated to actually build up on FileMaker with care commands in quite a few fields that need to be transmitted. So we did that using PHP on a small Linux server, and it works fine.
Well, I would suggest on the last condition, making the on-premise in brackets, because it doesn't necessarily have to be on-premise, right?
Yes, it could be cloud.
You can have a cloud-based web server,
yes.
which you manage. If you already have that, it might be an alternative for you.
Yes. It's part of that. Yeah. Any?
Interestingly, you could actually use this to interface with GPT-3. Because if you have a cloud access to cloud instance of that, then you could interface with GPT-3 and tell it, hey, connect to this API using it plain English, and it will do it for you.
Yeah, there are definitely quite a few possibilities. Any other questions, thoughts, suggestions? You like it or not?
Yeah, I'm new to Python. What would you recommend as a start point to learn Python, a use case or a book or a website?
I think some W3.
W3 is really good. That's plain text.
Yeah.
But if you want to use like video courses and can really get your hands dirty, I would recommend like Udacity. They have really good courses. They take quite a bit of while, but they're really well built courses.
Yeah, thanks.
Right.
Okay.
Right, I really hope you enjoyed this in building integration.